Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a fascinating, sometimes pretty dark, but entirely universal part of the human mind: why we crave attention. We're going to unpack everything from our brain's ancient evolutionary wiring to the modern digital landscape that has, let's be honest, completely hijacked our sense of self-worth. It's a journey through psychology, neuroscience, and everyday human behavior. And by the end of this, you might just start seeing your friends, your coworkers, and hey, maybe even yourself in a whole new light.
So I want you to start by picturing something. Imagine walking into a crowded room. Maybe it's a party or a family gathering. You step through the door, but nobody looks up. You speak, nothing. Nobody answers. You walk right past people, and they don't even blink. For most of us, this thought experiment doesn't just feel awkward, right? It feels deeply, viscerally terrifying. And that feeling reveals one of the absolute most powerful truths about human psychology. Every single human being fundamentally wants and needs attention. We often kind of brush off attention-seeking as just vanity or weakness, but the truth is, the fear of being invisible is a massively heavy psychological burden. We need to be seen. But why? Why is this need so incredibly strong?
Well, to understand that, we actually have to look back at our evolutionary origins. For our tribal ancestors, being noticed wasn't about ego at all. It was quite literally about staying alive. Think about it. If you were ignored by your tribe or pushed out of the collective, your access to food, protection, and mates just plummeted. Back then, social isolation was a literal death sentence. Because of this, the human brain evolved to directly associate attention with safety, belonging, and survival. So when your brain feels like it's being ignored today, its primitive alarm systems still go off, treating a lack of social attention as an existential threat. The need for attention isn't some modern defect. It's a hardwired survival mechanism. And this ancient survival drive translates into what psychologists today call validation. Validation is simply that feeling that we are seen, heard, understood, and valued by other people. It's the concrete proof that our existence actually matters. Just like your physical body gets hungry without food, the human mind literally starves without recognition and connection. And when this hunger is starved for long periods of time, the mind desperately starts searching for validation elsewhere. This is exactly where a simple, perfectly healthy human need can start to twist into something much more complex and, honestly, sometimes highly problematic. Childhood plays a monumental role in shaping exactly how we go about seeking attention as adults. Think about a child who feels loved and secure. They might eagerly run up to show their parents a drawing, hoping for a little praise. That's a completely healthy pursuit of validation. But what happens to a child who is emotionally neglected? If a child learns that the only time caregivers actually look their way is when they throw a massive tantrum or break something, their developing brain draws a really powerful conclusion. Negative behavior is the only way to exist in the eyes of others. Psychologists call this an approval-seeking schema. It's essentially a warped set of rules in the brain telling them that extreme behavior is the only way to be seen. They learn to prioritize dramatic actions over their own authentic needs, which leaves them totally without an internal compass for self-worth. When those kids grow up, that internal void manifests in wildly different ways, because not all attention seekers look the same, right? We have the achiever, who works relentlessly to earn awards and flawless grades, absolutely terrified that without success, they're worthless. Then there's the victim, who constantly highlights their personal hardships to secure sympathy. You might recognize the intellectual, who always has to prove they're the smartest person in the room, or the drama creator, who sparks conflict just because emotional friction feels like intimacy to them. Even the generous soul can be seeking attention, using extreme acts of kindness to ensure they're totally indispensable to everyone. Different masks, sure, but it's the exact same underlying psychological hunger, the desperate need to feel significant. Let's look at how this plays out in a setting we all know, the workplace. You have definitely encountered these two extreme archetypes of adult attention seekers. First up, we have the turkey. This is the colleague who constantly complains, feigns helplessness, and completely monopolizes the team's sympathy, which is often just a covert way to avoid accountability. On the total opposite end of the spectrum is the peacock. This is the coworker who aggressively brags, hijacks meetings, and overshadows everyone else just to secure constant admiration. And because both of these archetypes lack that internal compass of self-worth we just talked about, their moods fluctuate wildly, depending entirely on how much you react to them. Which brings us to one of the most surprising psychological paradoxes out there. Why on earth do people actively seek out negative attention? Why pick a fight at a family gathering or intentionally agitate a coworker? Well, to a brain that is absolutely starved of validation, being criticized, argued with, or even yelled at feels infinitely better than being invisible. Negative attention provides immediate, undeniable proof of significance. You are actively making an impact on someone else's emotional state, which means you exist. To a lot of people, being intensely disliked actually feels significantly less painful than being entirely forgotten. Now, when this need for attention solidifies into a rigid, inflexible pathology, we enter the realm of severe psychiatric disorders. Consider histrionic personality disorder, or HPD. Individuals with HPD experience acute, overwhelming discomfort when they are not the absolute center of attention. They often use rapidly shifting emotions, highly theatrical displays, and provocative behaviors to constantly recapture the spotlight. But what's absolutely crucial to understand here is that this condition is egosyntonic. That's just a clinical way of saying the individual completely lacks insight into their condition. They genuinely believe their intense, exaggerated behavior is perfectly normal. Early psychoanalysts actually referred to these dramatic behaviors as character armor, deeply ingrained defense mechanisms built to shield a highly fragile mind from severe internal shame. If we move to the absolute extreme edge of the attention spectrum, the actions become physically dangerous. This is fictitious disorder, which you might know historically as Munchausen syndrome. Individuals with this disorder carry out severe, deceptive actions simply to appear sick. We are talking about people who will actively falsify medical records, contaminate their own lab tests, or inflict literal physical harm on themselves, like injecting their bodies with bacteria or aggressively seeking out massive, totally unnecessary surgeries. And this brilliantly and tragically illustrates the sheer power of the human mind. There is absolutely no financial payoff here, no lawsuit to win. The extreme self-harm is driven entirely by an overwhelming psychological compulsion to adopt the sick role and receive clinical care and attention. So we've covered the deep psychology. Now let's look at the attention economy. Social media platforms have essentially weaponized our evolutionary hunger for tribal connection. And they do this through a mechanism psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. It is the exact same neurological principle that makes slot machines so highly addictive. Here is the digital dopamine loop. You post a photo or a thought online. You never know exactly how much attention it's going to get. Sometimes it's a little, sometimes it's a lot. That unpredictable delay creates high arousal in your brain. When those likes and comments finally do roll in, your brain's reward center is flooded with dopamine. But dopamine is notoriously short-lived. Your brain quickly drops below its baseline, leaving you craving the very next hit. Over time, attention completely transforms from a natural human need into a powerful, compulsive chemical dependency. And because users build up a tolerance to this digital dopamine, they have to continually escalate their behavior to get the same high. This has birthed a modern phenomenon known as sad fishing. You've probably seen a video like this. Someone holding a smartphone, tears streaming down their face as they record a deeply emotional breakdown. But the literal second their finger hits the stop button, the tears completely vanish and their face drops into a stark, blank stare. Sad fishing is the act of exaggerating or outright faking emotional struggles online to exploit the natural empathy of peers. It turns vulnerability into a social currency, guaranteeing a rapid influx of supportive comments and a really quick rush of digital validation. And this isn't just some random internet trend. We can actually map the psychology behind it. When looking at data exploring human behavior, a fascinating truth emerges. When you take an individual who is experiencing rising levels of real anxiety or depression, and simultaneously their physical real-world social support drops, sad fishing behaviors absolutely spike. They're desperately reaching out to the digital void because their physical world feels totally empty. The tragedy, of course, is that likes on a screen are incredibly fleeting. They completely fail to resolve the actual emotional void, trapping the user in this perpetual cycle of online performance. On the totally opposite side of sad fishing is the dark side of the creator economy, outrage architecture. Remember how we discussed that the brain prefers negative attention to invisibility? Well, social media algorithms operate on the exact same logic. Algorithms value negative, angry engagement just as much as positive engagement, because it all counts as time spent on the platform. Knowing this, rage baiters intentionally post infuriating, offensive, or destructively incorrect content. The craving for attention becomes so detached from actual social approval that these individuals find their validation simply in the sheer volume of notifications and the intoxicating power they feel by disrupting the emotional states of thousands of strangers. So it's clear things can get pretty toxic. Let's talk about breaking the cycle. If you encounter intense attention-seeking behavior in your everyday life, whether it's a friend, a coworker, or a family member, the most effective psychological response is to establish firm boundaries while still maintaining empathy. Remember, this behavior is very often a reflection of much deeper emotional deficits. You can acknowledge and validate their underlying distress. You can absolutely say, hey, I see that you're upset and I'm really sorry you're going through this. But you must carefully avoid feeding their theatrical performance with excessive drama or sympathy. You gracefully refuse to be the audience to a toxic play while still recognizing the human being on the stage. For the person actually struggling with an approval schema, the path forward requires a massive, deliberate shift. They have to stop trying to secure external validation and begin the really hard work of building a solid, self-sustaining internal self-worth. Emotionally secure people appreciate recognition when it comes, absolutely. But there is a massive difference between appreciating applause and requiring it to determine your value. They can be praised without becoming addicted and criticized without losing their identity, because they fundamentally understand that external applause can never, ever fill an internal void. Ultimately, true human connection doesn't come from a highly curated digital performance or a dramatic workplace outburst. It requires the actual courage of authentic vulnerability. So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to reflect on. Take a moment, strip away the social media metrics, the workplace accolades, and the opinions of absolutely everyone around you, and ask yourself honestly, do you know your worth when nobody is watching?